This also has a connection with the American Revolution, a very personal one. In his general orders for June 7th, 1777, George Washington said that, quote, "the music of the army is in general very bad." He therefore ordered that, quote, "the drum and fife majors exert themselves to improve it, or they will be demoted and have their extraordinary pay taken from them." He also ordered that every officer, for the credit of his corps, should take care to provide music. Good afternoon, everyone. We're the Sons of Liberty. I'm Noah Smith, and these are my brothers Daniel and Joshua. And thank you very much for braving the weather and coming out to see us. And we hope we can warm you up a little bit. Now we're going to play some reels. And a reel, as the name denotes, is essentially what you play at a party after you've already done the jigs, then had a bit of liquid refreshment, and then want to dance again. More strictly speaking, in terms of the figure of the dance, there's not a ton of difference in a reel and a jig. So it can be a little difficult to tell the difference when you're hearing the music. One of the ways that people in the 18th century spiced up some of those tunes to make a difference was the words. And a lot of times, the catchy words that people have to them, whether they're actually repeatable or not, makes them a lot easier to remember and to differentiate from each other. So now we're going to talk about ballads. Now ballad, the word that we think about when we hear the word ballad, is kind of a slow song that was introduced to us by the jazz era. Well, that wasn't true in the 18th century. In fact, typically, instead of dancing cheek to cheek when you heard a ballad, you started laughing very loudly. That was because a ballad told a story. It was specifically the kind of music in the 18th century that people used actually to pass down their history. Because a lot of people back then still could not write, they were very illiterate, but everyone knew music. So it was often the way in which people passed down their family or their country's history. Also, it made a popular way of mocking political or military figures, since they didn't have Twitter and Facebook and other ways of insulting each other. In the 18th century, these ballads were printed on broadsides, which were essentially a large sheet of paper that had the words to the song and a little bit of the music, just to help people get the idea. A great example of a ballad is this tune that we're going to do for you now called British Grenadiers. On September 19th, 1777, Thomas Hughes, who was a British officer under General Burgoyne, was captured by the Americans during the Battle of Saratoga and imprisoned in Philadelphia. Now, 2 years later, in his January 28th journal entry, Hughes noted this. Our most disagreeable attendant is the noise of the rebel soldiers who vociferate the song so loudly that the whole house rings with war and Washington. A favorite ballad. So this tune, War in Washington, was another adaptation of the British tune, the British Grenadiers. The British Grenadiers was originally written by Jonathan Mitchell Sewall. Now, many additional verses were added to this tune by both the British and the Americans throughout its history. Now, the British Grenadiers talks about the British elite fighting force, known as the Grenadiers, and War in Washington about the shameful British occupation of Philadelphia, which George Washington fortunately turned into more of a siege. Now, what we're going to do is to show you the complete difference between these two sets of lyrics in the very same tune. We're going to play you some of the verses of both the British tune, the British Grenadiers, and the American song, War in Washington. Hope you enjoy.
Of old never saw a cannonball, or knew the force of powder to slay their foes withal. But all brave boys do know it, and banish all their fears with a tone. Row, row, row to the British Grenadiers. Their dark and fathom councils our weakest heads defeat. Our children rout their armies, our boats destroy their fleet. And to complete the dire disgrace cooped up within the town, they live the scorn of all our host, the slaves of Washington. And when the siege is over, we to the town repair. The townsmen cry, hurrah, boys! Here comes the Grenadier. Here come the Grenadiers, my boys, who know no doubts or fears. And sing, to-row, row to the British Grenadiers. France shall fear with terror, and haughty Spain revere, while every warlike nation with court alliance here. And George's minions trembling round dismounting from his throne, pay homage to America and glorious Washington.
good day.
Thank you. So now we're going to play you all another ballad along those same lines about an incident that happened later in the year of 1777, in the winter in fact. So the incident was when the British fleet blockaded Chesapeake Bay outside of Philadelphia. Now, of course, at that time the Americans had no navy to speak of, which could break the blockade. So we devised something ingenious to achieve the same effect. The plan was to float about several hundred kegs down the river and into the British fleet. These kegs were filled, packed with gunpowder, and fixed with a mechanism that would detonate the charge upon contact with the hull of a British vessel. Unfortunately, there's a lot of ice in the river due that time of year, and so throughout the expanse of the river, there was just one explosion after the other. And so this caused panic to ensue among the British soldiers and sailors, especially when the rumor went around that the kegs all contained American soldiers. So for hours, the British Navy kept up a steady fire on the river and anything in it afloat. The commanding officer, General Howe, was reported to be too afraid to leave the arms of his mistress throughout the entire incident. He immediately dashed off a letter to London commending the bravery of his command throughout the, quote, attack. So the tune we'll play you now, The Battle of the Kegs, was written a year later by Francis Hopkinson, a great American satirist, and it was set to the tune Yankee Doodle, which was used by both sides to mock each other anyway, from the beginning of the war. And so this ballad, Battle of the Kegs, recounts in vivid detail the British Army and their gallant actions during the engagement with the floating wreckage. So we'll try to recreate for you Francis Hopkinson's satire with Battle of the Kegs. Hope you enjoy. Gallants attending here a friend shall forth harmonious ditty. Strange things I'll tell that late befell in Philadelphia city. 'Twas early day, as poets say, when just the sun was rising. A soldier stood on a log of wood and saw a sight surprising. As in amaze he stood to gaze, the truth can't be denied, sir. He spied a score of kegs or more come floating down the tide, sir. A sailor too in jerkin blue, a strange appearance viewing, first damned his eyes in great surprise, then said, "There's mischief brewing." The kegs now all the rebel bow packed up like pickled herring, and they've come down to attack the town in this new way of sailing. The soldier flew, the sailor too, and scared almost to death, sirs, wore out their shoes to spread the news and ran till out of breath, sirs. The motley crew in vessels new, with Satan for their god, sir, packed up in bags of wooden kegs come driving down the tide, sir. Therefore prepare for bloody war, those kegs must all be routed, or surely we despised shall be in British courage doubted. Kegs, 'tis said, though strongly made of rebel staves and hoops, sirs, could not oppose the powerful foes, the conquering British troops, sirs. From morn till night these men of might displayed amazing courage, and when the sun was fairly down, returned to sup their porridge. 100 men with each a pen or more, upon my word, sirs, it is most true would be too few their valor to record, sirs. Such feast did they perform that day upon those wicked kegs, sirs, and years to come if they get home, they'll make their boasts and brag, sirs. So while I'm in my refined clothes, I think we should probably move in a different direction. So we've talked about the music that common people played, soldiers would have played and listened to. Now I'd like to talk about the music of a different class of people, still in the 18th century. You know, it's interesting to note that throughout history there have always been two kinds of people. There's the richer upper classes, and then there's everybody else. So right now, we've already talked about everybody else, so let's talk about the rich people. And back in the day, they were called the gentry. And the gentry, of course, preferred a more refined type of music. Not necessarily classical. Yes, they loved going to see the great orchestras and whatever, but that wasn't necessarily available here in the colonies. So the English gentry and the colonial gentry enjoyed a style of music called the English country dance. And that's known as chamber music. So chamber music usually included a few small woodwind instruments like a flute, bassoon occasionally, but major strings there. We had cello, violin, viola like we played a little while before, somewhat larger. Then generally you'd be accompanied by a harpsichord, which is kind of like the pluck string precursor to a piano. So I think we should start things off with a delightful little chamber piece. It's one of my favorite, called Ramsgate Assembly. And it was about an English resort town in the north of England. It had a gigantic dance hall up there, which could be rented out for political or social occasions. So Ramsgate Assembly. If we go, 'tis 1 to 10. We shall return, all gentlemen as well as they, over the hills and far away, over the hills and o'er the main, to Flanders, Portugal, and Spain. Queen and commands and will obey, over the hills and far away.
So Brent, what'd you think of the music?
I was really impressed with those 3 lads, man. 2 brothers. They're only 16, those 2 youngest ones, and Joshua is 18. So, you know, it's like, I had to get his mom to sign the video releases from him. They were old enough to legally approve themselves doing this. But they have been at it so long, and all through the reenacting community. You know what I mean? That's culture, and they're like self-taught actors. Did you hear the songs they were singing? They had those bits worked out and sketches, you know, and just from the heart, you know, like let's save the history, you know. And this was so impressive to meet teenagers in 2020 with that kind of heart and worldview, you know. It's just mind-boggling. It just makes you feel a lot better about the new generations coming on. That there are some role models there, you know. So, yeah, I hope that we have chances to work with them a lot more into the future.